3, 2, 1. Go.
P-Tech Course 4, Student Outline, Texas Personal Property Appraisal.
Texas Personal Property Appraisal.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Copyright 2018, Property Tax Education Coalition. You're gross. Don't start. We're going to start on page 4, point number 2. Importance of personal property. The percentage of personal property value to real estate value varies among countries. In urban and industrial countries,
counties.
Oh, those are counties. Well, okay. The real estate value varies among those counties. In urban and industrial counties, personal property is a significant percentage of the overall roll value. Statewide, the percentage is approximately 11% of the total appraisal roll, or more than $279 billion. Sorry. Number 3. Accordingly, the proper identification and valuation of personal property is extremely important to local and state revenue generation. Number 4. Synopsis of the course. Well, the remainder of this course is divided into 11 sections. Number 5. Section 2 is a comparison between real property and personal property. Determining what is considered personal property requires an understanding of what qualifies as real property. Number 1, movable, not permanently affixed to real property. Number 2, tangible versus intangible. Number 3, inventories. Number 4, fixed assets. Number 5, leasehold improvements. I can talk about that. Number 6, Section 3 discusses the types of ownership of personal property encountered in the discovery process. Number 7, Section 4 explores the legal aspects that affect the appraisal of personal property, including the federal and state laws that govern personal property. Number 1, Fifth Amendment, due process and forbidding illegal search and seizure of property. Number 2, taxpayer may challenge in court. Number 3, taxable versus exempt. And number 4, data availability. Number 8, Section 5 gives a basic understanding of situs. Basic understanding of situs, the taxable location of property, and how to deal with highly mobile property, which is critical to personal property appraisal. Hey, the first time you saw that word, you probably said situs too. So number 1, assumed location of property for appraisal. Oh, where it situs. Like, that makes sense. And whether it's stationary, movable, or in transit. I'm going to move it over here. It's going to situs over here. Sorry. You won't forget it. Number 9, Section 6 discusses the challenges of finding personal property and discovery techniques, and such as how to find personal property. And such as, or as in, methods. And number 2, interpretation of information. Number 10, Section 7 covers determining relevant data to identify personal property accounts after we have located the personal property, such as number 1, data gathering. Number 2, data classification. Number 3, relevancy of data. Number 4, analyzing data. Number 11, Section 8 gives a basic understanding of accounting records, including data required to quantify and value personal property and financial records, such as cost, inventory, and depreciation.
Your favorite.
And number 12, Section 9 reviews depreciation concepts, the difference between accounting depreciation and appraisal depreciation, determining normal wear and tear, and various forms of obsolescence that affect the value of both fixed assets and inventory. Number 13, Section 10 discusses valuation techniques for fixed assets such as furniture, fixtures, and equipment that are a component of the total value of the personal property, such as level of trade, arm's length transaction, continual change principles, cost approach, sales comparison, price guides, and income approach. Number 14, Section 11 gives an understanding of valuation techniques for inventory. Many businesses hold goods for resale or parts for manufacturing, which are a major component of the total value of a business, such as level of trade, markups, arm's length transaction, density tables, mass appraisal, treatment as a commodity. Number 15. Section 12 discusses using mass appraisal concepts to value personal property. Appraisal districts must rely on standardized procedures and methodology that allow for the valuation of large numbers of property and statistical testing. Number 16, in addition to the sections in the student outline, the accompanying student workbook, that's the green thing, isn't it?
No, it's the next.
Oh, okay. The accompanying student workbook contains exercises and problems related to the materials contained in each of the aforementioned sections. Number 17, in summary, the appraisal of business personal property can be very challenging and complex. In many ways, the principles are the same as those used in valuation of real property. However, the ways in which they are applied may be different because a great amount of personal property is mobile. Determining situs can be difficult at times. That's what it looks like to me, so I apologize. Because a great amount of personal property is mobile, determining situs can be difficult at times. Much of the data that applies to personal property is found in financial or accounting records. Therefore, a basic understanding of these documents is important. And besides all that, you can do this. P-TECH Course 4 Student Outline, Section 2, Comparison between Real Property and Personal Property. Learning Objectives. Describe the differences between real property and personal property. Define tangible and intangible. State the differences between tangible and intangible personal property. List the 4 major categories of personal property. A. Introduction. The tax code defines personal property as anything that is not real. Wow. Unfortunately, that is not a very instructive definition. To get a better handle on what personal property in Texas consists of, we have to first figure out what it is not. To do that, we need to define real property. All property can be divided into 2 major categories, real property and personal property. B. The definition of real property. The P-TECH Texas Property Tax Glossary has the following definitions. Number 1, real property consists of the interests, benefits, and rights inherent in the ownership of land, plus anything permanently attached to the land or legally defined as immovable. The bundle of rights with which ownership of real estate is endowed. To the extent that real estate, quote unquote, commonly includes land and any permanent improvement, the 2 terms can be understood to have the same meaning also called realty, quote unquote. The Texas Property Tax Code in Section 1.042 says A. Real property means A. Land, B. An improvement, C. A mine or quarry, D. A mineral in place, E. Standing timber, or F. An estate or interest other than a mortgage or deed of trust creating a lien on property or an interest securing payment or performance of an obligation in a property enumerated in A through E. Number 2. The Texas Property Tax Code, is it supposed to be repeated?
Yes.
Okay. The Texas Property Tax Code in Section 1.043 defines an improvement as a building, structure, fixture, or fence erected on or affixed to land, or a transportable structure that is designed to be occupied for residential or business purposes, whether or not it is affixed to land. If the owner of the structure owns the land on which it is located, unless the structure is unoccupied and held for sale or normally is located at a particular place only temporarily, or for the purpose if an entity created under Section 52, Article 3, or Section 59, Article 14, Texas Constitution, the subdivision of land, installation of water, sewer or drainage lines, or paving of undeveloped land, notwithstanding anything contained herein to the contrary, a manufactured home is an improvement to real property only if the owner of the home has elected to treat the manufactured home as real property. C. The definition of personal property. Number 1. Personal property is defined by exception as property that is not real. The distinguishing characteristic of personal property is its movability without damage to itself or any real estate to which it might be attached. Number 2. The Texas Property Tax Glossary has the following definitions. Personal property consists of every kind of property that is not real property, movable without damage to itself or real estate, subdivided into tangible and intangible, also called personality, quote, end quote. And, as alluded to in the introduction, Tax Code Section 1.044 defines personal property as any property that is not real property. Number 3. Sometimes personal property is referred to as personality or chattels. No? Oh, those are cattles. D. Conversion of personal property to real property. Personal property by its nature is not permanently attached and therefore is movable. However, property that is permanently affixed to real estate and cannot be removed without causing damage to the real estate is real property, not personal property. Personal property becomes real property if it is affixed in such a way that it loses its original character and cannot practically be restored to its original condition. Number 1. 3 basic considerations for determining annexation or conversion. A. If an item is affixed to the land or structure so that it loses its original physical character and cannot be restored to its original condition as a practical matter, it loses its nature as personal property and becomes real property. If an item can be removed from the real estate without damaging either the item or the real estate, it is personal property. Number 2, example number 1. Machinery permanently affixed to a building, the movement of which would cause significant damage to the building, may be considered real property. Large coolers in convenience stores, bank vaults, etc. A. The item has a specific purpose or used directly related. The item has a specific purpose or use directly related to the primary use of the realty. Storm windows, for example. Number 3, example number 2, if a tenant installs a light switch in the wall could be damaged by its removal. Therefore, it may be real property. However, if a tenant places a sign on top of the roof, there is no intent of permanent installation, and the sign can be easily removed when the tenant leaves. The sign is personal property. A. Intent. To make the personal property a permanent addition to the real estate is stated or implied, found in a contract or lease. Number 4, example number 3. Process improvements in industrial plants, which often combine real and personal property, are generally appraised as personal property. Number 5, note. The mere bolting of machinery to the floor of a manufacturing facility for ease of operation would not be considered as annexed or affixed to the real estate. E. Classification of personal property. Personal property is divisible into 2 classes, tangible and intangible. Number 1, tangible, actual physical property. A. Property that can be seen, weighed, measured, felt, or otherwise perceived by the senses, but does not include a document or other perceptible object that constitutes evidence of a valuable interest, claim, or right, and has negligible or no intrinsic value. Texas Code Section 1.045. B. Tangible personal property includes, but is not limited to the following: office furniture and equipment, computers, software, store equipment, manufacturing equipment, signs, communication equipment, motor vehicles, farm machinery and equipment, leased equipment, small tools, commercial watercraft, leasehold improvements not part of realty, supplies not held for sale. Number 2, intangible personal property that is not tangible. Tax Code Section 1.04, Number 6 defines intangible personal property as a claim, interest, other than an interest in tangible property, right, or other thing that has value but cannot be seen, felt, weighed, measured, or otherwise perceived by the senses, although its existence may be evidenced by a document. It includes a stock, bond, note, or account receivable, franchise, license, or permit, demand or time deposit, certificate of deposit, share account, share certificate account, share deposit account, insurance policy, annuity, pension, cause of action, contract, and goodwill. B. Intangible personal property includes representations of rights to property. There exist rights and privileges for ownership, but no physical existence. Personal property that cannot actually be moved, touched, or felt, but instead represents something of value such as negotiable instruments, evidence of ownership. C. Intangible personal property includes, but is not limited to, the following: bonds, notes, trusts, patents, annuities, mortgages, copyrights, accounts receivable, insurance policies, franchises. F. Major categories of personal property. Number 1, tangible fixed assets includes non-inventory assets that have useful life of greater than 1 year, such as furniture and fixtures, machinery and equipment, machinery, tools, and dies, and tangible property in a relatively permanent location. Number 2, intangible property is property that represents evidence of value or the right to value under law and custom, such as bonds, notes, trust, patents, annuities, mortgages, copyrights, accounts receivable, insurance policies, money on hand or on deposit, shares of stock in corporations or mutual funds, franchises, and goodwill. Number 3, leasehold improvements are typically improvements made by a tenant to a leased structure or improvements owned by a lessee and constructed on publicly owned property. They can include almost any type of tangible personal property, but are categorized separately because of the special situs, and tax liability issues involved. A. In some instances, leasehold improvements are assessed as real property because the improvements are of a permanent nature and remain with the lessor at the end of the lease. B. Statutory mandates and office policies and procedures, all of which vary greatly among jurisdictions, determine whether improvements made by a leaseholder are assessed as real or personal property. C. Interior partitions, carpeting, wiring, plumbing, floor covering, heating and air conditioning, signs, painting, or exterior improvements such as paving and fencing. Number 4, inventories include goods intended for resale as well as items at every stage of manufacture, such as raw materials, work in process, finished goods, goods held for resale, in-transit goods, supplies, and consigned goods. G. Problem areas. Number 1, leasehold improvements can be problematic when determining whether to value them as part of the real property value or separately as personal property. Many times the value is included in a real estate and is difficult to separate. Close coordination between the real property and personal property department is necessary when appraising leasehold improvements. Number 2, intangibles are generally not taxable. However, in some instances, such as software, the item itself may be valuable as a result of the software component. To separate out the software would be impossible. A computer without its operating software does not function. There is no clear-cut legal answer to this dilemma. Number 3, minerals. Minerals cause confusion because they are real property but are typically carried on appraisal rolls as personal property. H. In summary, In order to define personal property, we must understand what qualifies as real property. Personal property can change its nature depending on the way it is attached to real estate or the intent of the owner for its use. There are two broad classes of personal property, tangible and intangible. The tangible class includes tangible fixed assets, leasehold improvements, and inventories. They are taxable items. Intangible class can be described as the evidence of ownership and is typically not taxable. Are we going to pause before we do student activity number 1? 2-1?